and we're going to officially begin. Today's OMO facilitators are Scott Hancock, our Executive Director, Tom Reynolds, our Education Director, our Government Relations and Research Manager, Bill George. We also have Justin Fiore and Sharon Easton, who are in the chat to assist you with any questions at any time. And I am Paula Chase Hyman, the Member Engagement Director, who sent you all of the emails about this lovely event. Today's presentation is being recorded. Please feel free to post any questions in the Q&A. However, with Sharon and Justin in the chat, if you forget to do it or if you're having issues with it, you can also place them in the chat and they will place them in the Q&A for you, or Sharon will. If you need any other information after today's OMO, we do have an information for new officials page located on our website. And there you're able to get a lot of the information plus that we'll be talking about today. And so now I'm going to turn it over to our Executive Director, Scott Hancock.
Well, thank you, Paula, and a very good afternoon and warm welcome to our newest municipal officials joining us today for this virtual orientation. I hope that your recent Thanksgiving holiday was restful and safe for you and your loved ones. We hope you got a nice break from the routines that we are all dealing with as a result of the COVID virus. So we want to start your week, the week after, if you will, with some information that we believe will make your roles as municipal officials clearer and hopefully a little bit easier. And we want to certainly thank you for carving out time in your very busy schedule to participate in this virtual OMO. We know your time is valuable. Like me, you're probably very tired of Zooming all day long. That certainly dominated our lives since the pandemic struck, but we do sincerely appreciate that you decided to spend the next 45 minutes with us to learn more about your role as a city or town official and about your municipal association, better known as the Maryland Municipal League. If you're a city or town elected official, you certainly know by now that every little bit of training helps on a job that comes with no minimum qualifications, with no experience required beyond the desire to make your community better. And for those of you who are joining us as appointed officials, we hope that the orientation today helps you discover something about the league or maybe Maryland local government that you didn't know before. You know, the very point of a virtual orientation is to provide a quick infusion of information, and I do mean quick, that will give you more insight into this new responsibility that you've undertaken, that of being a municipal or appointed official. Today, we're going to give you some nuggets of information related to the fundamentals required for all municipal officials, whether you're elected or appointed. Those invited to be on the call today have held municipal office for less than 15 months. This means that some of you have more than a year under your belt and others just a few weeks. So let's pause our webinar for just a moment and find out just how long our attendees have held municipal office. And here's the poll. Please mark your answer and submit. How long have you held municipal office? Okay, so wow, we've got 69% of our attendees today who have been in office for less than 6 months. That's pretty unusual. Normally it's the other way around. So 69%. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We're glad to have you here. So let's get started with some of the fundamentals. Some of you have been around long enough to have attended MML's virtual summer conference in virtual Ocean City, and or our October fall conference, which we just had the first week in October. However, because you've been busy tending to your constituents' needs, of course, you may still not fully understand what or who the Maryland Municipal League is. So let me spend just a few moments explaining exactly who we are. MML represents all 157 Maryland cities and towns, including Baltimore City and 2 special taxing districts, which, by the way, are located in Montgomery County. In other words, we represent you and your municipality. And our mission, as the slide states, is pretty straightforward. We're all about strengthening and supporting municipal government through advocacy, lobbying, if you will, and the development of effective leadership. And we meet that mission through 4 components. They are technical assistance and research, legislative advocacy and intergovernmental relations, member programs, and conferences and training. Let me expound just a bit on each one of our components. For the technical assistance and research side, we're very pleased to offer a fully staffed research office at MML to answer questions on a wide variety of topics. And over the years, we've responded to thousands of inquiries, and we're able to go beyond Maryland borders to provide our membership with examples of how cities and towns all over the nation are tackling the tough issues. During the onset of this pandemic, we immediately established a one-stop resource page on the MML website, mdmunicipal.org, for all issues related to the coronavirus, including all the governor's special orders, executive orders, examples on how other cities and towns are administering the regulations associated with the pandemic. And we even have a page where you can discreetly discuss your questions or experiences with your fellow municipal officials across the state. Our research staff always responds to each of your questions promptly and carefully via email, telephone, text, or even the old-fashioned way, the United States Postal Service. The Maryland Municipal League is your voice for legislative matters, or government relations, if you will. Our staff is active throughout the legislative session and beyond, staying current on laws that could affect Maryland cities and towns. We then take the steps necessary to support, to amend, or push back against legislation relevant to municipal governments in Maryland. You know, the last legislative session ended abruptly 3 weeks early. And what the next session, the 2021 session, will look like in January is anyone's guess right now. But the one thing that you can rely on is that MML's strong presence will be felt in Annapolis, whether it's in person or virtual. We have an equally strong voice, municipal presence in Washington, D.C., and we do that through our affiliation with the National League of Cities. And I know many of you on this call today have some familiarity with NLC and have been involved in their recent conference, which was just held last month. Let's talk a minute about our conferences and training. It consists of a wide range of education initiatives, among them webinars like this one that we're having today. We also recently concluded a Young Municipal Leaders Summit. We have our premier training events. I mentioned earlier the virtual summer conference in virtual Ocean City, and then our fall conference that was held in virtual College Park this year. We quickly converted those events to virtual when we realized that in-person training was just simply not possible. MML's leadership and staff was creative and flexible and made the necessary pivot to produce what we believe was a professional, educational, and even enjoyable event that we did both in the summer in June and at the fall conference in October. And last but certainly not least, our member programs are a diverse portfolio designed to help you serve as ambassadors for municipal government in and near your communities. You know, you and I already know that living in a municipality brings a greater sense of quality of life and a sense of community. It's really essential that we highlight that fact, both among our constituents and to those living outside the town limits. Your ambassadorship, be it educating your legislators or your neighbors, helps people understand the important role that municipalities play in Maryland's way of pleasant living. So together, the League's 4 components provide a comprehensive and dynamic advocacy and education environment that we believe makes your journey as a municipal official, if not easier, certainly smoother. We hope to get to know you better, and we hope you get to know MML better as you continue to serve the citizens in your community. And we want you to know that we are truly here for you. We are your association, your MML. And now I want you to meet our Education Services Director, Tom Reynolds, who's going to talk about MML's mission to make you that knowledgeable municipal official that you always wanted to be. I might add, Tom is a former elected official in the town of Berwyn Heights in Prince George's County. Paula, who you met earlier, is a former City of Annapolis director. And I spent a number of years as a city manager before coming to MML. We are all very proud of the experience that we bring to you. We thank you for your attention so far today. And without further ado, let me introduce my colleague, Tom Reynolds. Tom?
Thank you, Scott, and good afternoon, everyone. I think it's reasonable to say that new municipal officials arrive on the job with an array of qualifications, many of which will be quite helpful as you enter elected or appointed office. However, few people arrive with an understanding of the unique roles, responsibilities, regulations, and processes that will guide your time in office. What we aim to introduce here are some of the most fundamental concepts that every new municipal official should be familiar with. So what we're going to try and do here is highlight what those key concepts are, including a slightly deeper dive into one of them in a few moments. And we'll also provide you with some helpful resources and recommendations for further study along the way. So if you haven't already done so, you're strongly encouraged to peruse, if not study, your municipal charter. This is where you'll find essential information related to governing authority, roles and responsibilities, proper process for things like passing ordinances in your budget, filling council vacancies, conducting elections, and of course, amending your charter. And one of the more consequential pieces of information you're going to find in your charter is information on your municipality's form of government. So to walk you through some of those concepts, I'm going to turn things over to MML Governmental Relations and Research Manager, Bill George.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. And as Tom mentioned, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the forms of municipal government. We selected this as the topic to dive a little deeper, because understanding the structure of your municipal government is really a building block to your growth as a municipal official, and hopefully we'll be able to give you a little bit of insight. So as Tom mentioned, your municipal charter is the guiding document where, when it comes to your form of government. And although it's unlikely that the charter will state what form of government is in use, the authorities and responsibilities will certainly be found there. So now I'd like to walk you through a few of the main forms of municipal government and talk a little bit about their characteristics and some of their strengths and weaknesses. So on the slide, you'll see the 4 main forms of government. So we'll start with that of a commission. So this is the most fundamental form and has no real separation of powers. Collectively, the elected commissioners are the legislators of the town. However, individually, the commissioners are directors of administration. In other words, they act as department heads, for instance, Department of Public Safety, or Public Works, or Finance. It's oftentimes the choice of smaller jurisdictions. So some of the strengths associated with a commission form of government is that the commissioners get to experience or work directly through the work with their departments. They really get, they're in the weeds with the policy and administration of that department. They're equal when it comes to legislators in their municipalities. So therefore, collaboration is promoted since there's no real head of the government. It's also easy to describe responsibilities. It's one of the more simplistic, stripped down versions of government that you'll find. So a few weaknesses, since everybody is a commissioner on a similar standing, there's no clear leadership sometimes, and that can lead to some stunting of decision-making. And also the detailed work that comes with the administration of a department can sometimes lead to a bit of neglect of town-wide policymaking. So for instance, as heads of the department, oftentimes a lot of the commissioner's time is dedicated towards the administration of that department and not so much the legislative aspect of their commissioner role. Moving on to weak mayor council. Some of the characteristics you'll find here is that the mayor and council share primary policy making and executive roles. The mayor is usually the one who presides over the council, but is a member of the council and is not elected by the voters. So they're more often times elected as part of a election for council. And then once all the council have started their term, then a mayor will be selected out of the council members already elected. So these elected officials perform both executive and legislative roles. The mayor's role is primarily ceremonial, and the mayor will generally possess few, if any, real executive powers. And with that comes limited authority to appoint or terminate department heads. And so it's really more of a ceremonial position. Some strengths of this form is that, similar to commissioners, collaboration is promoted due to council members all having similar standing. And without direct oversight of a department, policy and legislative actions can be the focus. A few weaknesses. The term mayor can be a bit confusing. Since it's not separately elected, it can be misunderstood by the constituents as to their role and responsibilities laid out in the charter. And day-to-day operations can sometimes be an issue without a dedicated administrator. Moving on to the third type, we've got the strong mayor council. This is most like you'll see in the federal and state government, with a very distinct separation of powers. The mayor serves as the chief executive and has full responsibility over daily operations. The mayor is typically not a member of the governing body and is typically elected separately from the council. The mayor oftentimes has veto power over legislation passed by the council. However, the council may then override that veto, very similar to what we see in our state legislature and in the federal government. The mayor has the sole power to hire and fire department heads, as well as other city staff. The mayor prepares and administers the city's budget. However, the council is the one that approves that budget. So you'll see as we go through this, there is a real check and balances and separation of powers between the executive and the legislative aspect. The council is responsibility for enacting all the city's policies, ordinances, and resolutions, including the budget. So some of the strengths, there's the clearest delineation of responsibilities, as well as a very strong checks and balances system built into the strong mayor council form of government. The mayor has high visibility among his constituency and kind of typifies maybe more what the constituent may think of a traditional mayor. Weaknesses: the veto power of a mayor, while an important checks and balance on legislative action by the council, can also lead to gridlock on policy issues if there is a real policy disagreement between the executive and the legislative branches. And as you could probably tell as I was going through some of the characteristics, there is quite a bit of authority that rests with the mayor. So that can sometimes be a bit problematic if there's no check on that person in power. So lastly, we'll talk a little bit about the council manager form. Council members or commissioners are elected, often at large, and serve as the policy and legislative body. The commissioner of the council then appoints a city manager as the chief administrator, and that city manager serves at the governing body's pleasure and has the sole administrative authority. That city manager prepares and administers the budget, implements policy, and has most other day-to-day responsibilities of the functioning of the town. So some of the strengths of this form: the manager administrator is generally a skilled professional. This is their job, and with it comes a lot of responsibility. But also, when a good one is hired, they come with a lot of experience and know-how, so they can jump in, with their feet running already. The administrator is not elected, and therefore is somewhat removed from the political process, right? So if they're not elected, then they're never campaigning really, and they can kind of stay a little bit outside of the potential and any sort of inside disagreement among the elected officials within the town. Lastly, just a few weaknesses. City managers' experience that they may have had at administering other cities may come with a cost. These are very experienced and smart and bright individuals who may come with a higher salary. And also, while the city manager is a bit removed from the political process, it also results in them not being directly accountable to the citizens, right? While they serve at the pleasure of the legislators, they don't serve directly, they're not elected. So their not being elected kind of cuts both ways in terms of a strength and a weakness. So I hope this gives you a little bit of an overview as to the main forms of government that you'll find. As you can see, the structure of municipal government is certainly not a one-size-fits-all proposition, and each of them has strong positive and negatives. It's really up to the individual municipality to determine the best course for their city. Are there any questions at this time before we go on to a quick little quiz? Let me check. I don't see anything in the Q&A. Okay, shall we move on to the quiz? So, all right, so on this next slide, I've laid out a few characteristics of a town or city. And as you see the poll pop up. So take a look at the characteristics, the authorities, the responsibilities that were found in this town's charter, and jot down in the poll which form of government you think most closely resembles characteristics on the screen. All right, let's give just a couple more seconds to cast your vote, and then we'll go into a little a quick discussion about this hypothetical. All righty. Okay, interesting. Few votes for pretty much all of them. And so it was a bit of a trick question, I have to be honest with you. The answer is other. This is actually this is a structure that was modeled after a municipality here in Maryland. And it really pulls from several of the forms that we just went through. So those of you that selected the individual forms, you're not necessarily wrong. It's really just a combination of several of them. So as you can see, it has a bit of a commission element in that the elected legislative body may be department heads. It has a little bit from the council manager element in that the manager runs the day-to-day operations of this municipality. And certainly from the weak mayor element in that the mayor is not separately elected from the council, but is a member of the council. So this is actually quite a common occurrence in Maryland. Many municipalities have this type of hybrid structure that pulls from the different buckets or categories of forms of government that we went through. And it's actually increasingly so as local governments become more sophisticated in the services that are offered to the residents, more power is granted to administrators, regardless of the rest of the structure. So the hybrid element is really very much alive and well in Maryland. And a way to possibly think about where your structure may lie is to think less kind of in the very firm buckets or categories that we went through earlier, and more of a continuum or a spectrum. And many municipalities in Maryland have a hybrid form that kind of falls between those points on the spectrum rather than neatly in one category or another. So be sure to check out your charter and look for these important details regarding your municipality's form of government. It really is an important element of you understanding the roles and responsibilities of elected as well as appointed officials within your city or town. If you have any questions, be sure.
Bill?
Yep.
This is Paula. We do have a question. Does this hybrid form help to reduce some of the problems with the pure forms of government?
That's a really good question. And I think there certainly can be an argument made that is the case. And that's the reason why hybrids are becoming more popular, is that the municipalities are deciding which elements they think they'd like to prioritize in their form of government, and will work with their citizenry and can therefore kind of cherry pick the best elements, the best for them. They can kind of cherry pick those elements that they want to prioritize and make a hybrid that really suits the types of services they want to provide, the type of culture they'd like to instill, and the services they offer to their members. So I think that is absolutely a really strong argument for a hybrid.
Oh, let me jump in here too. And it looks like Scott may want to jump in as well. So yeah, it's a great question. It gets asked all the time. I just want to share a conversation I'd had with a couple of municipal attorneys where we were kind of bouncing this around a bunch of years ago. And, you'll find people fall into different camps of which form of government they favor, which one's best under what circumstances, depending on the amount of services you provide, et cetera. But the conclusion that I think everybody reached in this particular discussion, which I really like, is all of these forms of government and any form of hybrid can work really well. What's more important is that you have good custodians among your elected officials and your top management of the municipal government, and you can make any of these work. So I know lots of times there's a tendency to want to jump in and say, oh, the problem with our government is the mayor has too much power, or the council members are getting too involved, or we want to have a city manager and a council manager form of government. So, but anyway, that's my 2 cents, which kind of combines with some other 2 cents.
Tom, you really stole a lot of my thunder. I would make the additional comment that we are fortunate in Maryland that the state government, who gives us the authority as local governments to enact our own charters and to be creative with them, does allow that creativity and that flexibility. A lot of states, you have to choose. Do you want a council manager form of government? Do you want a commission form of government? Here it is, this is the way it is, and this is what you have to do. So as Tom said, being able to craft something that works right for your community, that brings in every piece of the different of the four pure forms of government, can work in your community and can work quite well. And I think the other point is the charters, the ability to amend a charter, though it shouldn't be automatic, and you shouldn't do it like every month, nor every year, because the charter is your constitution. But you have the ability to change the charter if there are issues as time goes on with a particular form of government or another. So give your charter some time to work for you, and the most important thing is read your charter, read the section about the form of government, and figure out what charter provisions you have and what you should be following in your community.
All excellent points. Thank you both for the context. That you're absolutely on point. And that was I'm ready to wrap up on that section. I don't see any more questions in the Q&A, so I am going to toss it back to Tom.
Thank you, Bill, and thank you for sharing that. I actually find that one of the more fascinating topics that we end up having to discuss. So, but moving on, and speaking of the charter and other information that's in your charter, perhaps the most significant responsibility as an elected official involves the creation, review, and adherence to your municipality's annual budget. In fact, for a lot of you, your term begins just as that process is drawing to a close. When it comes to process, responsibilities, timing, and legal requirements, your charter here too is your principal guide. So you'll find information within your charter as it relates to the budget on things like the requirement that your budget be balanced, and that is true for every local government in Maryland. Requirements and process for public review, notice the hearings you have to hold, budget amendment procedures, audit requirements, and also rules for borrowing money. With the next slide, there's resources that, or there's other resources that are unique to local government budgets and financing that you should be aware of. And two of those I have pasted here. And one is at the bottom right from the Government Finance Officers Association. It's the web link is there. I think somebody will throw that in the chat. But the Government Finance Officers it has a lot of best practices on there that are accessible, not just for finance officers or city managers, but for every elected official, everybody involved in government who has questions about that. So the National Office of the GFOA is a really good resource. There's also a Maryland chapter, which is www.mdgfoa.org. And I know there are lots of, again, finance managers, treasurers, city managers throughout the state who are involved in that organization. The other resource we have up here is Local Government Finances in Maryland. The Department of Legislative Services, which is the research arm of the General Assembly. They publish annual reports, and a lot of them are really insightful. And particularly, as is true with this document, if you want to compare your municipality's revenues and expenditures and other related trends. Next, we move on to transparency. And this is an area that is really somewhat unique to government. And when we talk about transparency, we're talking about both how business is conducted and where, when, and how Town records have to be made available to both the public and the press. So the Maryland Office of the Attorney General publishes 2 manuals that are designed to guide you through the mandates established in the state's open meetings and public information acts. Here too, the URL is listed at the bottom. I will say, I like their old URL, which was oag.org or .gov, but it's now fully marylandattorneygeneral.gov. And if you go to, even if you just go to the homepage, there's an option for open government and it takes you to both these sections. So, so you'll find the Maryland Open Meetings Act and Public Information Act manuals on this website, and along with access to past compliance board opinions. So see where the compliance board has found in favor of governments, where it has ruled against, and you can help factor that into some of your decisions as you go along. We also encourage you to reach out to, going back to Bill and the MML Research Department. Justin is on here as well. And we have Jim Peck, who's been a longtime research person, and they can give you quick answers on the Public Information Act and open meetings as well. So we encourage you to use them as a resource for that and a lot of other things. And I think one place where MML has been particularly helpful is in circumstances like COVID-19, where changing conditions have forced new approaches to how meetings are held, and consequently how, in many cases, these acts are applied. So the information we're sharing here is, of course, just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the municipal information that you need to govern effectively. But fortunately, there's many resources and learning opportunities which municipal officials can benefit regardless of how long you've been in office. Because it's really true that education is something you don't ever want to finish. Fortunately, your connection with the Maryland Municipal League affords you a variety of opportunities to not only learn municipal government fundamentals, but continue learning as new state laws are passed, new technologies emerge, best practices develop, and the circumstances under which we govern change, such as COVID-19. So the centerpiece of MML's educational program revolves around a partnership. It's called the Academy for Excellence in Local Governance, and that partnership involves the Maryland Municipal League, the Maryland Association of Counties, the University of Maryland's School of Public Policy, and also the Local Government Insurance Trust. Participants in the Academy take classes on several of the topics touched on previously. The section that Bill covered is right out of the Structure of Municipal Government class. And municipal budgeting is, we touched on as well. But there's also classes on conducting effective meetings, ethics, employment issues. And graduates of the program receive a certificate from the University of Maryland, and you're invited to attend a graduation ceremony at the university's campus in College Park, which is always a really cool experience. So the best place to find Academy classes and other training relevant to municipal officials is at MML's annual conferences. As Scott mentioned earlier, we just completed our actually second virtual conference back in October, which included 2 Academy core classes plus 8 other learning labs, as we're now fond of calling the virtual version of these sessions. And at the press time, at press time, our hope is to still return to some level of in-person training at next summer's MML conference. That's all continues to be up in the air, as any of us who continue following the news and observing know. But we're doing our best to plan that as some sort of a hybrid event where we can combine live attendance with some virtual elements. But in the meantime, we also expect to offer a growing number of Academy trainings later this winter and into the spring. Some of the topics that will be Academy elective classes one is on strategies for better community engagement. And that is the end of January, and preventing civil unrest. So we encourage you to keep your eyes open for both of those, as well as some standalone Academy core classes. If you have any questions on training conferences, just throw those into the Q&A. and we'll get them answered for you, or you can reach out to me anytime at the ML offices. And with that, I'm going to turn things back over to Scott.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Bill, for such great information. I know that you new folks are feeling a little overwhelmed, probably. Yeah, the big help. So as I told you when we started today, that we were going to provide you some tidbits, some nuggets of information, and we hope we have been able to do that. We're going to open it up for some more questions. Please feel free to put your questions in the Q&A as we go forward. But let me just sort of summarize in trying to pay close attention to our time this afternoon. What does all this mean to you as new elected or appointed officials? We hope that you see all this that we're sharing with you and our introduction of ourselves to you to let you know that MML and its resources are here whenever you need us, whether it's calling or emailing one of us. We are available to you. You can research articles in Municipal Maryland Magazine, and hopefully all the new elected officials, if you weren't just elected last week, are subscribed to Municipal Maryland Magazine, which comes out 6 times a year. You can do that certainly on your own schedule. You can scroll through the MML website, mdmunicipal.org. You can do that anytime, day or night. You can receive legislative, conference, or member program alerts through our website. All you have to do is sign up for those and receive our regular newsletter, which we call the e-bulletin. During this time of year before session, it's every 2 weeks. And during session, we email that out every week. I guess the most important thing is that we're encouraging you to connect with us however and whenever you need it. But the most important thing is to please connect with your league. The league and our programs are only as effective as our members' willingness to tell us what you need. Let's pause for another Q&A time. Anybody have any questions? Please put it in the chat or.
Scott, we did have one question right now asking if the links that we've talked about today and in our chat will be emailed to participants. We will craft a document that has all of those links and send them to anyone who has RSVP'd. So you should be able to have that by the end of today.
And this is being recorded, correct, Paula? So it would be available on our website?
Correct. We'll have it up on MML's YouTube page, actually, and that is where they remain until we do a brand new one. Right now, we're on track to do these probably every 3 months or so, and we will. The information does change slightly. We do have another question. How are MML's legislative priorities determined?
Okay, well, let's see. Does everybody have an extra hour to spend on this call? I will try to make it very brief. Our legislative priorities are chosen very democratically in this organization, and always have been. Every summer, after we finish the summer conference, we reach out to all of our members and say, do you have any legislative priorities that you would like to be considered for the upcoming legislative session? Our members submit their recommendations. They are eventually reviewed by our legislative committee. The legislative committee is appointed by the president every year, consists of about 30 people from all over the state of Maryland. They look at all the legislative action requests, or LARs, and they decide on the ones that they would like to propose to our membership for adoption. Legislative committee has some very interesting conversations and discussions, sometimes a little heated, about priorities, but at the end, they normally come forward with some very, very solid recommendations that represent the interest of all, if not most, if not all, Maryland municipalities. And that actually goes to the legislative, or to our fall conference. Used to be called the legislative conference a long time ago. And the fall conference, the members acting as members of the league at the annual business meeting at the fall conference, actually adopt our legislative priorities. So that is the way the priorities are determined. And I might add that we remind everybody constantly that just because a particular city or town's legislative action request was not chosen by the membership or suggested by the legislative committee to be a statewide priority, it doesn't prohibit an individual member from asking their delegate or senator to introduce the bill. And many times MML, the legislative committee, will support that bill going forward. So sorry, that might be a little long-winded answer to the question, but hopefully that explains how we choose our priorities. Other questions? Any other questions?
I'm not seeing any other questions right now, Scott. So I think we have oh, wait a minute.
Got one in chat.
Okay. Robert Hardy says, I am in a media desert, no daily paper, no radio station, no local TV, except a cable channel. Any suggestions about how to get info to the citizens? I have been using Facebook primarily.
Well, I'm happy to have Tom and Bill and certainly you, Paula, on the call, and I'm sure you have some ideas. I use Facebook myself. That's seemed to be a really good medium. And let's face it, when I first started in city management, Tom was an elected official. We had weekly newspapers that were covering all of our events, everything that was happening in the communities. No more. They're no longer even available. So to get the information out there are lots of ideas and suggestions. And Tom, Bill, Paula, ideas?
I'll let others add specifics if they want to, but I can say that we just did a session at our fall conference on this topic. I think it was the fall or the summer, but those should also be available, I think, on our YouTube page. Paula can correct me if I'm right there, but we could get you a link to it and you could actually see the recording of that. And it was really an outstanding session on, I think relevant for municipalities regardless of size, but it really gets to the complexity of that Scott's referring to. You still have people who are relying on things like, the local newspaper, others, and even social media. It's way more than Facebook, as we all know. And some folks are more likely to get that information from Instagram than they are, Facebook. So yeah, it's complicated, but there's information out there.
I'll jump in and say, from a perspective, just because MML, very much like you are our constituents. So we have the same challenges when you're talking about trying to get in front of people when they're already, so much white noise going on around them. And the approach that we take is to be patient. A lot of times it can feel like people are not getting the information. They are, it's just that it trickles. And you do have to take multiple approaches because everybody has their own preference for how they want to access information. So for example, we find that we have to repeat the information on our website, in our e-bulletin, in an email, sometimes on social media. And so that obviously can feel overwhelming when you're a staff of one, but it simply is how you have to do it. So whatever, Facebook, you keep doing it, but if there are other ways that your town has, if you have a town newsletter, et cetera, just continue to repeat the information in all the outlets that you have. People will get that. They just, it'll just take a while.
One more piece to add. I think that the Facebook usage is excellent. And if you're looking for, I think even using if the town has a website, using that as maybe a repository for some of the documents that may be really important for your citizens. I'm thinking town council agendas, minutes, any sort of service changes, that sort of thing. You can house them all on a public facing internet site, which is inexpensive, relatively easy to create, and then use the other outlets to point them there. So for instance, you could use the Facebook page to say, hey, for more information, click here, and it sends them to your website. So you're not recreating the content on several different platforms. You could even mention it in You could have it posted, on a town sign. Visit our website here. It's a relatively simplistic way of hosting large pieces of very important information.
And I would absolutely encourage everybody to listen very carefully what Paula says. Every way and any way you can communicate. The old adage is that people need to see or hear things 7 times before it really registers. So you can't overload the information trail in every potential medium that you have available to you.
Although, Scott, let me throw in the reality check too, which is it doesn't matter how many times you put the information out there and how well you do it, somebody's still going to show up at your town council meeting complaining, why were we not informed of this? So
I'm sure that never happened in Berwyn Heights when you were on the council. All right.
Wait a minute. It's to Scott, this is for you. It says, about Centerville. So any thoughts about our town?
Wonderful community. Absolutely wonderful community. I had a lot of wonderful memories. It was the first town that I managed, and it's grown a great deal since I was there. I won't tell you how long ago, but I'm certainly available if you'd like to talk offline after the seminar is over. I'm happy to talk about Centerville and some of the things that I remember way back when, and I'm sure new issues and problems, but a lot of successes to share as well. Was proud to have play a part in that community in the past.
And he's passing on his thank you. Thanks to Tom. We have no other questions, and I will say that give us about a day or so to get this off of the cloud and onto our YouTube page. But again, once it's up there, it will remain up there for a couple of months before we have another OMO. And please encourage other members from your municipality to attend one of these. These are the best way to understand what your league resources are and what membership brings to you. Use us your way, and hopefully we'll be seeing you all at our next live conference sometime in the future.
Let me conclude by just saying thanks to the stellar MML team who put this together, Paula and Bill and Tom, and certainly Justin and Sharon, who are helping us behind the scenes. We really appreciate your work in making this available. Please continue to stay in touch with us, connect with us, as I said earlier, reiterating Paula. We really look forward to being with you in person very, very soon. And until then, please stay safe. And thank you so much for joining us for today's virtual orientation for municipal officials.